Hello, survivors, and welcome to the Zombicide Fans Podcast, where we discuss and review all Zombicide games. I'm Ryan.
I'm Schmedley.
And I'm James.
And today we're joined by our special guest, Jason, who is, quote, just an average gamer, and while he can be found online, he is not an internet personality, end quote. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Today will be our review and discussion about Zombicide's second edition, the flagship game. And quick reminder to our listeners, head on over to website zombicidefans.com, where there's a ton of amazing community-submitted content, custom missions, custom survivors, heroes, zombies, equipment, house rules, templates, variants, you name it. All kinds of goodies, free to use, free to sign up, submit your custom stuff as well. You can also find links to our Discord and Facebook group on the site and in the show notes. All right, starting us off, Jason, what kind of board and tabletop gamer are you?
I would classify myself as like a hybrid board gamer. One of my top favorite games of all time is Scythe, which has definitely got some of that Ameritrash combat possibility, but it's also very Euro. So I like all types of games and definitely love games with dice in them and the ones that are very thematic. So Zombicide has definitely become up there as one of my favorite games of all time.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you mentioned Scythe. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I need to get a lot more of that game played. I love that game. Have you played like all of the expansions and the campaign and all that stuff too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Rise of Fenris campaign and all the expansions. It just makes that game so much more interesting and better. Yeah. Modular is super cool. If people haven't checked that out, that really can help break some of the kind of solvedness that some people claim that the game is.
In case like you guys aren't familiar with Scythe, it's an area control game and like an alternate version of post-World War II with like giant mechs and stuff. What's so cool is we just mentioned there's a campaign, an area control game from like 2 to 5 players.
7 even now.
Oh my gosh, 7. So 2+ players that you could play as a campaign, and like the story evolves, and it's got like a little bit of like there's hidden stuff in the envelopes or boxes as you go, right? That kind of thing. It's so
You ever
cool.
played, James? No, I've never played it.
All right, cool. I'm not the only one just sitting here.
All right. Jason, what got you started on Zombicide?
All right. So funny story. So my wife is probably my primary gaming partner, but I've also got a gaming group and love those area control games. But also started to get more and more into cooperative games. Well, over time, my wife wasn't interested in anything Cthulhu or zombie related. And then on went and did it, and they announced that Marvel Zombies was coming out. So I saw that coming up, and I thought, well, just to check it out and see what it's all about, I should get the second edition one and just make sure the mechanics are fun and not just get pulled in by the Marvel theme. So I get the game, we start playing it, and lo and behold, despite it having zombies, my wife really likes it. And so I start getting more and more. I went down the slippery slope and just got all the stuff to the point now where I have all the Marvel zombie stuff in a different cupboard here. And I'd still say second edition ends up being the go-to game that we have. And I can talk a little bit more about that, why that is a little bit later, but it is probably our favorite Zombicide game of all. And I would not have expected that. Like everyone online always says, go for your most favorite theme. The mechanics do have a lot to say with it too. And so, yeah, it's super fun. And I look forward to ways I can combine them together in some crazy house rules I've thought of.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, like it's so punny, like pardon the pun, but it's so infectious. The whole Zombicide system, like you can't just have one. I can't just have one. It's also Pringles. Like I can't do it. So at least everybody we have on the show.
I think that's especially true for our topic for today. I think second edition is probably the most like affected by its own expansions, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Big time. Okay, so which Zombicide games and products do you have?
So I got the second edition, I got the Marvel Zombies, and I recently acquired some White Death retail. So yeah, I've definitely gotten infected with the Zombicide bugs.
Nice. Yep, it spreads. Okay, so what's your
White Death before us?
Oh, retail only.
Yeah. Just like everybody else. So, Jason, like, what are your favorite and least favorite Zombicide versions so far?
That's a big question. The second edition definitely is, I think, my number one favorite. And a lot of that has to do with how I've customized it with some expansions and the all-out dice and things like that. Marvel also is a lot of fun because it is different and it is the theme. You know, you get to play as Spider-Man and stuff, or going in the zombie mode. They really did a nice job with the push your luck element in being a zombie there too. That one's really good. And what I've done with White Death is I've created a conglomerate. I've bought on eBay the Green Horde, like trebuchet and the ballista, and then I 3D printed all these walls. And that's starting to be a real fun, creating this castle siege kind of feel with it. Really enjoying that. So
Yeah.
any game that I can customize or really buy into the feel of it. I think I'm one of those people who, if they came out with a pirate Zombicide, I would be hook, line, and sinker for that one for sure.
Hey, there's another vote for pirate Zombicide, Schmedley.
Yay, pirates.
Yeah, I'm a famous pirate Zombicide hater.
But the next episode, you're kind of taking it back. You're like, well,
Yeah,
we're looking at-
when we saw what they were doing for Massive Darkness, the sea stuff, it kind of changed my mind a bit. You
Yeah.
said you own all the Marvel zombie stuff. Does that include like the big Galactus? And
Oh yeah, not the big Galactus. So
that's fair.
All right, cool. If you've got any questions, send them in. We'll be happy to answer any questions about Zombicide, the games, the show, about us. If you're interested in being a guest on the show also, etc. Right? So email us at zombicidefans@gmail.com. We're looking forward to having more of a mailbag section going. And I keep forgetting to prompt the audience for that. So hit us up.
I do have a question for you because we're about to do our news segment. We only have a few points this time, but I do want to know how you guys feel about us going through the news because the turnaround time on these episodes isn't the fastest. So we're probably not the first source of news. Do we spend too much time on it? Would you rather spend more time on it? Just let us know what you think.
All right, so we have some real news here, some real sad news. So an update on April 24th, 2025 from CMON. Our CMON community means a lot to us, so we felt it was important to share with you some difficult decisions at our company today. Given global conditions, CMON has decided to focus on our commitments to our customers and partners, prioritize timely delivery of existing projects. So effective immediately, we'll be pausing all future game development and new crowdfunding campaigns until trade conditions have stabilized. Unfortunately, this all involves extremely difficult staffing decisions, affecting all of our creative teams with reductions. We didn't make the choice lightly, and our thoughts are with everyone impacted. We are incredibly grateful for their roles and our success over the years, and these talented people will be missed both professionally and personally. But yeah, so the big takeaways are that, yes, they are pausing all future game development and new crowdfunding campaigns until the trade conditions have stabilized. And they've had to let go of a lot of people, creative folks, creative teams, which is just terrible. I mean, for them and their livelihood and their families. And then also selfishly for us, the gamers, these products that we love, we absolutely love. And we keep buying, we keep collecting, we keep mashing up and making custom stuff and having great times with, who knows what the future is going to hold for all that. So it's a little scary. It's really unpredictable. And it's just the times. Just to say objectively, it is causing a lot of change in our world, in all the world. So that includes CMON. And then just for me, I was so looking forward to Marvel Invasions, which kind of seemed like it was the zombie-less Marvel game, that I really hope that still could come to fruition. I hope that the situation gets better, and I hope that, situation for CMON gets better, and I really hope that they can bring all their creative people back on, because they're amazing. And we're back. James had a video malfunction there. He was stuck, but we're back. The only other thing we really have for the news is that White Death is delivering in the US. So we're seeing it pop up in all kinds of places now in the US, but none of us, unfortunately, so far for our Kickstarter campaign.
Not yet.
I was way too optimistic because I got an email. It's like, your CMON, Kickstarter thing is coming, or something from CMON's coming. I was like, yes. And I sent a screenshot to the guys, and then
Bragging about it. He was like, I'm awesome
Such
and
a
you
braggart.
guys suck.
like,
You'll
I'm
never
the
get-
best first of my name. But yeah, when I got it, it was this little box, and the FedEx guy was walking away because I got to the door. I ran to the door when I heard the FedEx truck, and I grabbed the box from him, and I was like, I almost stopped and be like, is that it? But I was like, maybe this is what? And so I opened it up, and it's just the empty Cthulhu Death May Die box because they replaced my dented one that I got from the last campaign. I was like, oh my God.
So I received a big box Sunday, the 3rd, and it didn't come with the core set, or I don't think it came with the Ninja Turtle box. It came with all the extras. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And then the second box got delivered Monday, which is much smaller, and it had all the core stuff in it. So I did have time to go through it all with a fine-tooth comb because Board Game Geek and Discord people have been reporting broken miniatures, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So after my last experience with a CMON product, I really wanted to make sure everything was there and wasn't broken. And I'm happy to say that everything is as it should be, as I'm normally used to getting from them.
Yeah.
So
And if you could, this way you can paint them as soon as possible so we can play Senate.
A couple things. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How amazing does it all look to you? First,
oh, it's really neat. The miniatures are amazing, like you would think. And I've already got one little nitpick, though. There's not a miniature guide, a key for how to place your miniatures in the core box, which I think is really odd. I don't know why they're moving away from that, because that was such a nice,
such a good thing.
positive thing. But the walls look cool. I love the walls. They're big enough to look like walls, but not too big that you feel like these are going to be hard to store. The other thing that surprises me is, based on all the boxes I saw, I was really expecting it to take 3 Ilax shells, and I was able to get it all in 2, which you can do with Undead or Alive and Invader. And I was, for some reason, expecting way more stuff. I don't know why. I'm not mad about it. It's just I was really expecting on 3 shelves. So now I got an empty shelf.
all right.
That's good because I have 2 shelves available for you.
Well, then you are probably prepared.
Good to know. What else was I going to ask you? Oh, yeah. So when are you going to start painting them so we can do the review for the show?
I've got 14 survivors for Undead or Alive on my painting table right now. I'm
man.
first.
I have not even started that. Yeesh. So our standard kind of like thing, by the way, for the show to review a new product like that is like James and I both are relatively hardcore about, wanting to paint our stuff so we experience the game how we really want to first. So, give us 2 or 3 months to paint from the time that we've received our White Death pledges to be able to actually review the thing. So sorry, we're not completely on time.
One other thing that had me very joyful was the plastic tokens. I love the little cauldrons. The little cauldrons are fun. I know it's something silly to be excited about, but the plastic tokens, and there's plastic tokens for the pizza slices.
Oh,
Heck yeah.
nice.
I did see that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious. Talking about painting miniatures, Ryan and James, are you guys speed painters or what kind of level of paint job do you go? Because painting all those zombie hordes yet again, I'm sure I've experienced as a fellow painter, it's quite the undertaking.
So I use like speed painting methods in that I will rattle can prime my miniatures. If the weather's really bad and I'm desperate, I will bust out my airbrush. On Zenithal is like spraying from black from underneath and white on top. And then I will use primarily like 90-something% Citadel contrast paints that are like the Army Painter speed paints is like the ones that people always talk about. Those are the worst in my opinion. So I use Citadel contrast for most of it. And then Vallejo, I always forget what it's called, Vallejo Express Color for like the last 10-ish%, like 5 to 10%. And then I don't touch speed paints. Army Painter speed paints are terrible. Their chromes are great, but other than that, I prefer those other brands. And that's my kind of speed, air quote, speed painting method. It's not very fast, though I'm still very slow. It takes a long time, but that's what I do. What about you, James?
I got this great method. All my survivors, brown. Zombies, gray.
That's the worst method. Mm-mm.
So I do a little bit of a mix. I paint my survivors and bigger monsters to what I would call tabletop gaming quality. I'm not going to win any golden demons with them, but I think they look pretty good. The zombies, I basically do a method of kind of a monochrome look. So standard zombies are, say, 3 to 4 shades of gray. Say the berserker walkers would be 3 to 4 shades of brown, just so they're easy to stand out against the survivors. I play with people my age, and that means old. And so our eyesight, just keeps going in one direction. So having the zombies being those solid colors against the survivors is a lot easier for us to tell, what's going on the tabletop. And it's a little bit quicker way for me to get all the zombies painted as opposed to, trying to spend a bunch of time on every zombie.
Yeah, that makes it much more playable and getting it faster to the table. So I totally get that. I've like colored the bases of some of the ones. So like the Berserkers have the bright orange base and the Toxic Walkers have the green, because I try to just block paint and I overuse shade to try to make up for my painting skills or lack thereof.
When I started out painting, like I really started painting with like the Star Wars Imperial Assault games with Sarastro on YouTube. Probably, I think a lot of people are familiar with him and his work is excellent, but it's like very technical and it's kind of old school. And when I look at those now, they're not nearly as good as like the method that I use now. Now it's been years and I've had a lot more practice, but I just like to paint in a much more simplified and vibrant way because again, like on the tabletop, like James is saying, we're only getting Our eyes are only getting worse, but I'll never forget this time when I brought new miniatures to the table once. I was like, oh, I didn't put a wash on them yet. And one of the guys is a casual gamer. He just came over to play my games once in a while. He's like, those look amazing. It was the first time I ever heard that. It's because he could really see all the colors and they weren't so like, ooh, they look great under studio light and they look great when you're really up close. That doesn't work for this level of tabletop gaming, I think, as well as just like good, solid, vibrant colors that really stand out. All right, that's the news. Coming up, our review and discussion about Zombicide 2nd Edition core game. Check out Board Game Goodies and save 10% with coupon code PODCAST at the URL boardgamegoodies.shop, where you'll find various game upgrades and accessories, including the new Zombicide 2nd Edition compatible insert and organizer. Keep all of your game pieces organized, not just for storage, but speed and convenience of setup, teardown, and play. Also available are the new 3D double-sided objective tokens and pimp weapon / epic weapon crates. And yes, they all fit in the box with the aforementioned custom insert. There are a bunch more goodies for other Zombicide games: Massive Darkness, Cthulhu Death May Die, Marvel Champions, Lorcana, Star Wars, and more. Listeners can save 10% with coupon code PODCAST over at boardgamegoodies.shop.
So Zombicide 2nd Edition, I have my stats here. It's a game designed by Raphael Gouteau, Jean-Baptiste Lullian, and Nicolas Raoul, and maybe David Preddy? His name is in the book, but not on the box. It's a remaster and rules update for the original Zombicide game, which you might have been able to guess from the name. Its campaign ran from October through November of 2019, during which it had 21,735 backers and raised just shy of $3.5 million. Over on Board Game Geek, it has a score of 7.9 with 4,500 reviews, putting it just above the average score for Zombicide base, which I think is pretty fitting for our default setting. So maybe we can talk about what it did to earn that score. What do you guys think of 2nd Edition, broad opinions?
It's broadly better than Classic in almost every way. Obviously, through this podcast, we'll talk about each and every little step of why it's better, but I was quite happy with 90% of the changes that were made. It obviously looks better. I know that's it's subjective, but let's just bring in the big elephant in the room here and talk about it. It's got plastic dashboards. Come on, guys. What else do we need to talk about here? It's got plastic dashboards. Classic doesn't. Clearly, it makes 2nd Edition way better. That's what I think. Jason?
Well, Zombicide 2nd Edition was my first Zombicide, so everything about it was amazing and awesome and new to me. But as I've come to understand more of the Zombicide line, I think several of the things that make Zombicide 2nd Edition so great is that they put skills on the back of the ID cards. That's one of my favorite things that I'm surprised it took them that long to do. But of course, the plastic dashboards, as you're saying, James, that's obviously an important feature to be able to utilize something that you can flip over and see what the skills are. And then my favorite mechanic comes from expansions, but it's the all-out dice. That is one of the most awesome things. It creates this fascinating yet bombastically fun decision that, do I go all out with these dice? And that is one of my favorite ways to play 2nd Edition, truly.
Yeah, absolutely. We will get more into the mechanics, but first, Ryan, you got any broad opinions on 2nd Edition?
Yeah, a vast improvement over the 1st edition for sure. Zombicide Invader was my favorite by a lot when it came out because it got into the action a lot more quickly and they worked on a lot of ways to speed up setup of the game. And they brought a lot of that into 2nd edition. I was obviously a huge fan and it's my go-to. Like if I'm going to introduce someone to Zombicide, it will be Zombicide 2nd edition because it's Walking Dead. It's just your standard zombie theme as far as I'm concerned. And it's a solid game and it's a lot faster than the 1st edition stuff.
You know what else Invader did? No doors on setup. And that's something we carried over here. There are actually doors to these buildings. They're printed on the tiles now.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about what makes this version of Zombicide unique mechanics-wise.
So I think the most obvious mechanical change, not just from 1st edition, but from all previous Zombicides, is we now have an Abomination deck, which goes alongside a new focus for Zombicide 2nd edition, which is this kind of marks a turn for, I think, the franchise, basically, where it starts being a lot more Abomination focused. Instead of them being bosses, they're more like unique enemies now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Is this the first time they did that?
Yes.
I think this is the first Abomination deck, yeah.
And I guess the closest thing to that would be like the Necromancers in Black Plague, right?
Well, there wasn't a Necromancer deck, though.
Oh, that's right.
It was just a necromancer in the spawn card.
That's just how I do it at
There
home.
was, yeah, in one of the web missions we played, I think we made like a pseudo abomination deck.
So speaking of the abomination deck, this wasn't new to me because I didn't come up with this idea. Someone on Board Game Geek did, but how to deal with all the amount of abominations you had in fantasy. So in Classic, you didn't have that many abominations, so it really wasn't that big a deal to go through them. And, they had their own cards. Whereas when you started getting into fantasy, you have 2-3 dozen different abominations. And so how do you get those to the board? And somebody came up with the idea of, okay, every time we draw an abomination, we're going to draw from this deck of all of our abomination spawn cards. And it just seemed like a natural way to do it, as opposed to having, 30 some odd abominations running across the board. And it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't see that idea and go, oh, you know what? That makes a heck of a lot of sense. Let's do it that way.
And the great thing is that the rules for the abominations are on those cards. That's the thing that is the secret sauce to that deck, is that you don't have to have a rule book open next to you while you're playing to know what the different abominations do. And so I think that's really fun that way. It keeps everything simple and clean. You can just have them sitting alongside the map. Sometimes when we've played, we'd put up like our bounty board of the different abominations we've killed, and it's kind of a fun way to track who all you've seen if you've had multiple abominations show up.
That's a good point.
As far as other mechanical changes go, specifically from first edition, we were talking about this before the podcast, but in the rulebook here, there's just a neat little table on like the 5th page with like, if you played the first one, here's everything you need to know with dedicated page numbers. And that's awesome. That's an amazing do for a second edition of a game. Every Zombicide should have that. Where it's like, play another one. Here's major differences.
Every time I open a new Zombicide, I'm still like, where's the part where it tells me? And then there's like a little box that's like, Zombicide veterans, read the whole thing. Loser, sucker. Just like, dang it.
They have a thick rulebook too, so I'm glad they went through that. Most of it's missions, because there's so many missions, but...
Yeah, with Classic, they at least did this for you. When they introduced new skills to the seasons, that they would put a little asterisk saying, this is a new skill, which obviously isn't going to come up as much as actual rules. Having the little index of rules changes is really great.
So yeah, speaking of, if we want to talk about specifically new mechanics, we got, Dark Zones. I think this is the first time Dark Zones show up, right?
No, we had them in Invader with Darkside, but they worked differently. Yeah. So there were Dark Zones in Darkside, strangely enough, but they didn't work quite the same way. I like the way these work better.
Can you tell us what the difference is? I don't remember the differences between the two.
So in first edition, and in most of them until now, what's going on with my lighting? In first edition, and in most of them until now, when you opened a new building for the first time, when you broke open a door, you would spawn on every single zone. And it would mean if you're orange or red, you could get overrun by spawning 3 sets of runners and then drawing the extra activation. But now, when you open a building, I'd say roughly half of them are dark zones, and those are the only ones you spawn on, which gives them the liberty to make much bigger buildings without having that issue.
And that just goes to the overall idea. One of the overarching ideas behind this new edition was they wanted to make the game faster. They wanted to make the setup faster. They wanted to make getting in the action faster. They wanted to make putting miniatures on the board faster. Everything that they were trying to do was to speed the game up.
And so, yeah, what's the difference between the Dark Side Dark Zones and the second edition Dark Zones?
So the Dark Side Dark Zones basically limit your sight, so you can only see so far unless you have prototype weapons or special skill like enhanced senses. It really didn't have anything to do about spawning. Where
the dark rules in campaigns, like the nighttime.
Right.
I think they're almost mechanically identical to those.
In this version, that's where you spawn, and then when you're shooting into those zones, you require 6s to hit.
Gotcha. Do you guys often play with the Dark Zone rules in second edition? Because it's an optional rule in the back of the book, right?
So is driving cars.
You know, that's a bad placement for that because the mission tells you whether or not you can use a car, you can drive a car or not. So it's a weird spot for it.
If you're not playing with Abominafest and Dark Zones, then you're not playing the game right. I don't understand why you would play it any other way.
Especially for the original Abomination rules, for the additional Abomination focus. The original Abomination rules, which is just one at a time, is crazy, especially when you start adding expansions and you have a deck that's thicker than your spawn deck of just Abominations.
Right.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay, so, and, wouldn't it be nice if there was some crazy person out there that went and updated all the old boards to include Dark Zones? Wait a minute. Did someone do that?
I'm guilty as charged as being crazy. Yeah. So I own everything from Classic, and I didn't want to just stop being able to play with it. And so I went and updated all the missions, all the tiles, made artwork for the stickers so you can print them off, at Kinko's or whatever your local print shop is or at home, and then stick those to your boards. They include the epic weapon crates, the objective placements, and they don't include any extra doors because that's just not the way Classic tiles work. So you still have to look at the missions to place your doors. Sorry, Schmedley. But I went through and not only did I update all the missions that were in the rule book, but I also updated all the gaming night rules, 10 missions to Toxic City Mall to include season 3 to be able to mix with it because they did not do that when they came out with Toxic City Mall. And then I added 15 more missions in Angry Neighbors to flesh it out to 10 for season 1, 10 for season 2, and 10 for season 3. So all in all, there's a really cool site you can go to and download all 100 missions to play your old stuff with the new rules.
Yes. All right. That site is, of course, zombicidefans.com. So yeah, head on over to zombicidefans.com. And what should they search for? Like what's a good keyword search they can kind of use to be able to find one or all of those? First to second edition.
I think that's what the title of, I think that's the title of all of them.
Yeah. That's so awesome. I forgot you added all those extra ones too, to kind of fill in the gaps that kind of you continue where they left off.
Right. And so also just to put it out there, I didn't create any of this stuff. I just updated it all. All the missions, I didn't create a single one. I took missions, the ones that I added into were from the compendiums or from the online missions. So I'm not trying to take credit for creating any missions or anything like that. So if you don't like them, don't blame me. And if you like them, you don't have to say cool to me either. Yeah, the Compendium 1 and 2 all had missions for the 3 seasons as well as online. And I just took those and kind of cannibalized them for my purposes.
Cool. So to recap, if you want to play all of your first edition and all the first edition expansions using second edition rules, including Dark Zones and other things, go get James's first to second edition upgrade kits on zombicidefans.com.
I've always said if they were ever going to do second edition season 2, like the best thing they could do is probably just re-release all the, like we have the upgrade pack, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, but just re-release all the zombie types, all the mechanics for the hospital and the prison and the mall and new missions. Like this one redid all the first 10 missions from season 1, but we then got new ones using the same tiles. So like do stuff like that. It'd be a very cool way to just celebrate the history of Classic.
And if 100 missions aren't good enough for you, there's 25 of them in this book. So that's 125 missions of Zombicide you get to play.
That's a regular weekend for James, but for the rest of us, that'll last us a good while.
That's a lifetime, yeah.
And thinking about first edition to second edition, I noticed that there's a thread on BGG that talks about how to take second edition and make it more like first edition. So I'm not as familiar with first edition. Are there things that you guys who are much more familiar with first edition wish that second edition had done differently?
One thing that I was thinking about a lot when we did our episode on first edition, because before that I was all in on the changes. In the sake of simplicity, we made every spawn card be one zombie type in second edition, and this is a thing they did in Invader also. In first edition, it was separated by adrenaline levels. So the same card might spawn a bunch of walkers on blue and yellow, and then fatties on orange and red. And that was a very cool way to make early game you only encounter walkers, and then runners and fatties, brutes. When did they become brutes?
And technically in the update of this book, so if you have an original book, it's going to say fatties in your book. I think in 2021 is when they updated the PDF online to be brutes.
Okay, I'll go with brutes. My book does say fatties. But yeah, just the ability to have those be more like late game enemies, which is kind of just something you can't do when they're all one type. I thought that was a very cool vibe. It gave the walkers more of a role.
So there's nothing that I would necessarily go back and want. There are some things that they've kind of added back in with the Rio de Janeiro campaign. They added back in the idea of the wound card. And if you got wounded, you took a wound card and it replaced an inventory slot. So basically you could hold one less thing. And I understand that some people like that. It's not a big deal to me. I wouldn't go back to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't go back. I won't go back to first edition for anything. Second edition just altogether better to me. Like there are some things that are different that I might kind of feel nostalgic about or feel like I might miss, but yeah, it's much better. I think it's improved overall, and it's improved in ways that matter to me, where it's streamlined. Like I get your point, Schmedley, about like the feature of walkers come early game and then fatties or brutes come more towards the late game, right? And runners will come more towards the late game. That all makes sense and that's cool, but I will take the streamlined game and the much easier to read cards every day over that. And
it's not nearly enough for me to wax poetic about the virtues of first edition.
Yeah.
But I definitely fully prefer second.
Yeah.
But if they wanted to do anything to make it more like it, I get it. That's for visual clarity on the components, and they updated a lot of stuff like that. The equipment cards are different too.
But there are some people like Ty, the guest of our first couple episodes. He's like, no, I like the aesthetic and the style of first edition way more. He'll never bother getting. I think he got second edition and he got rid of it too. There's a friend of mine, Kevin. He said, yeah, I like first edition. I like the more survival aspect and grind of it. He just wants more of a survival game. I was like, well, I don't think the Zombicide is the game for you, maybe. Like, this is just my opinion, but it's like Zombicide just keeps getting better because they keep leaning into what it's good at, which is just being an action game. If you really want like more of a survival game, like, I don't know, check out this War of Mine or other survival game like Robinson Crusoe, which is not a zombie. Actually, they have a zombie scenario. I haven't played though. So yeah, it's not a slow survival game. It's an action-paced game, and I think it does well. I think it does well there.
I do think we don't usually spend a whole lot of time on difficulty because there's so much homebrew to be had in that realm. The second edition is definitely easier than first edition, I will say, if that's something you care about.
Tuning the difficulty is always something that you can do relatively easy though in these games, I think.
Very easy.
Yeah.
How to make it ultra hard. I know some of the Zombicides have that. I'm trying to remember if this one did or not.
I think it does have like tuning the difficulty.
It might tell you like which cards to take out.
Well, also if you consider the optional rules as optional, I guess that's one way to make it harder. But again, to me, that's just the base mode, the optional rules. I don't even think that's a consideration.
James says, if you're a wimp and you're not from Texas and you can't handle Abomination Fest, then get out of here.
Yep. Sorry.
And then let's see, what else was I going to say about the... Yeah, okay, we can move on, right? It's been a while here.
Yeah,
this is great.
I was looking through this whole thing. Most of the changes are very minimal. I will say the other major thing, which I think was already fixed in Invader, correct me if I'm wrong, compared to first edition, we did fix the targeting priority. This is probably the most ignored rule I've ever seen in any game. In first edition, if you were in a zone with a friend, you always shot them before shooting enemy. There's nothing.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So friendly fire first came up in Black Plague.
Oh, they fixed Black Plague.
Black Plague was when we first introduced friendly fire, and they've just rolled with that rule ever since.
Yeah, because the first edition, it was just
a crazy thing to put in the rules.
Yeah, first edition has the most complained about rule in that game, which is like, again, just to reiterate, like if you shot into a zone that had a friendly survivor, then you only hit them before you hit. You have to unload all your hits and kill survivors until you could then finally spill over into walkers and so on. And everybody hated that, and everybody else ruled that, and then they finally brought it into the rules later. It's like, okay, on misses.
Before fatties, then.
Sorry, with fatties then?
Yes.
So I think it was walkers then.
Yeah, in classic and in fantasy, it's walkers and then fatties, whereas in Invader, it's tanks before workers, and then in this game, it's brutes before walkers. So Invader is what changed the hit order on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I think there's less mechanical identity in this game just because it is the default. The default, at least, where most games compared to it, when you want to talk about the mechanical uniqueness of them.
Actually, I did write a few things down while we were getting started there.
We do have a few things I see here.
So like pimp weapon crates, that was new. So back in the day in first edition, you can only get pimp weapons from the pimpmobiles. By the way, real quick, I still just really don't like, this does not age well, but like pimp weapons and pimp mobiles is icky and gross.
When do
And
they-
please, Simon,
Yeah,
like,
when did it
change
become
that
an
next
epic
time.
weapon? Or is that just
Yes,
a term that... Okay.
So in fantasy,
that
in fantasy, they're vault weapons. In Invader, they're prototype weapons, and in this one, they're pimp weapons until 2021 when they changed it over to epic weapons.
Ah, did they change all
I knew at
components
some
to
point
epic?
they were epic weapons. That's the same one where they did roots?
Yeah, so it's
When
exact
they were
same.
only
It's
from
only
Pitmobiles,
changed. They're now muscle cars.
when they were only from Pitmobiles, it made sense, I guess. But that is another, especially when you find them in weapons crates, it's super weird for them to be pimp weapons. But then that's another thing, just like there's more Abomination focus, from here on, there's more focus on these epic weapons, because last time in Invader, which was the one right before this, they were more easily obtainable. Before then, there were a few per mission in fantasy, but they were kind of side grades that you could use outside instead of being like much better weapons. And
No,
then
this basically takes all your old pimp weapons from Classic and then reintroduces them as these epic weapons that you can now get. So, some games you can pull 9 of these things, whereas the most you'd ever get to pull in a Classic game might be 2, because usually there was only 2, that would come in a set. So you could definitely pull, and admittedly, that is one of the things that helps makes this game a little easier, is the weapons from top to bottom are better than the weapons from Classic.
everybody gets a red weapon in this one, and this is the first game where that both happens and that the red weapons are really good. Whereas in Invader, everybody could get a prototype weapon, but they were just kind of okay.
I remember going back and playing Black Plague, which after I'd played second edition. And I remember the first time I drew like some kind of salted meat or whatever, and it was like 1 AP. What? It's full like put off because I was used to the rice or the water or whatever. In this one, that gives you 3 at least.
I will say, when you're pulling from the Epic deck in this one, and this is the first time it's come up in a while, because normally that deck is a lot bigger than just the core game. If you pull the Walker card, that sucks.
Yeah.
That's a tough card to see.
So I'm going to give you an old man complaining story, Jason. Back in our day when we played Classic and pull food, we couldn't even get 1 AP. So the 1 AP in Black Plague was even better. Back in my day, we didn't get AP.
It's just fodder and you drop when you were wounded, yeah.
We had to go
Right.
uphill both ways just to get 1 bag of rice with no AP.
Exactly. Yep.
No AP
It's also
given.
called AP now. I think that's new.
Yeah,
That is new.
it was XP, now it's AP, and it's got to be because, so XP experience points, very typical game term, and then now it's AP adrenaline points, which makes more sense with the danger bar, and because they have the campaigns now that have experience, like campaign experience points, so it makes sense that they would do that.
I think even lore-wise, this game is later than first edition.
Yeah. You know what kills me, real quick, super tangent, is like, I was like reading the whole comic books volume 1 comic going like, okay, how does Wanda get her eye patch? Like, what happened? What happened to Wanda? What's wrong with her eye? They didn't never do that in the story. I didn't read volume 2 all the way yet, but maybe it shows up in there. Okay. Let's see. So yeah, there are new car rules. Cars were, there was like so many FAQ points on cars for first edition, and second edition, they really changed some things up just in a lot of little ways and really streamlined it. I really like the new car rules. What do you guys think? Schmedley?
I have to be honest, I'm having trouble remembering what the old car rules were.
Okay, so in Classic, you could run through a zone with 20 zombies, and if you rolled 24 pluses, you were going to kill 20 zombies. So the cars were broken
It was
in
full on,
Classic.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, it's only 3 dice all the time. The other thing that kind of helped mitigate the old car is no matter what, you were also going to run down your friends. Whereas in this one, if there's no zombies in the zones, you don't run down your friends. You only have to worry about if you're entering in zones they have friends and zombies.
I like that. It's like you're swerving, like, oh God, like just dealing with the zombies, and then you hit your friend. But if only your friend is there, then you're like, hey, how's it going? I'm here. You couldn't hop in.
And because they changed the order in which you hit things in ranged attacks, they had to make the damage on the car too.
I actually liked that about it made it stopped the car from being just such an ultimate tool, right? Once fatties and her abominations were there, well, abominations still, but once fatties were there, you're like, well, my car can only go so far with this. I can't run down the fatties here, so I gotta change up my plans. So that was kind of a good thing, but I appreciated it being easier here in second edition. Also, I love that in second edition with the car, you can, let's see, is it that you can drive away now with zombies in the zone before you couldn't? Or no, wait, that's not it.
No, you could. Yeah, you could do that.
I mean, the
both
cars are
ways.
slippery, but I think they were before.
Yeah.
The big difference is if you run through the street with survivors alone in a zone, you don't risk running them down. That's the big change. Whereas before, you were going to hit them.
I will admit that I don't really like the cars. They're weaker than most of the good weapons that you can get from the red crates, right? The epic weapons. Sometimes I felt like in play, they feel more like a place you can hide in and be safe than a tool of actual transportation or destruction, but I could be biased.
Still in the police car, draw until you find a weapon. That's still there, right?
Yeah, and you can
Yeah.
pull ARGs.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure we didn't play wrong because we definitely used that and I didn't look it up.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm still like, my muscle memory is still like, okay, let's get ready. I'm going to keep flipping a lot of cards. But no, there's like hardly any not weapon cards in second edition versus first edition. There was an awful lot more of non-weapon cards.
Pretty stack, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very armed city. Now we're in Texas.
Very armed. Oh yeah. Totally Texas, Fort Worth. And then let's see, they have companions in second edition. This is the first time we've had companions in like the whole timeline of Zombicide games, right?
No, we had companions and angry neighbors. The rules for companions work here different.
I knew
Very
there were
different.
companions in advance.
Yeah, the companions and Vader are also slightly different,
Right.
but more towards what we're doing
They
here.
are a little different.
Yeah, so like I keep getting confused on how companions work. Would you mind explaining real quick, James, like how they work in this game?
So if you find a companion and you rally it, you're their leader. So they're stuck at their hip. They don't take up an equipment slot, and all you get from them is their blue skill. So you get their blue skill, which can be very, very cool, but they are also a hindrance in the fact that they count as a survivor for pretty much every purpose. They count as a noise token. If they die, you lose the game. So you can't let them take a wound. Whereas in the Angry Neighbors versions of unless the mission said specifically otherwise, you could just feed a companion to a zombie to not take a wound. Whereas in this one, if you lose the companion, you're going to lose the game, which is an easy way to segue to this goes along with Invader, where they changed the whole idea of if you lose one person, you lose the mission. Whereas in fantasy and in classic, you could lose people and still continue on.
Note on the companions, I thought was interesting because I just played a mission last night with the companions, is that made me realize that was kind of like the early playtesting for the bystanders that happen in Marvel Zombies later on. Just you're getting just a single skill and they're just kind of there with you, from traveling around. So I thought that was interesting. And you had to protect them from the zombies. Oh, that was kind of, it was
Yeah, it is. And I feel like Marvel Zombies, I feel like they did it a lot better. It feels a lot more streamlined, more simple, because in the companions, I just keep forgetting, like, wait, what do I get? It takes up a lot of space to have these big survivor ID cards next to your other survivor ID card when you're already playing 6 survivors and, you're bored and everything's hogging the table. It's kind of a lot. And remembering all those blue skills, it gets difficult for me.
Aesthetically, that's my only complaint about the companions. I don't need the companion rules to be really complicated and have to, read a bunch on them. But the fact that you got an ID card now and you're like, what do I do with this thing? If I stick it in my inventory slot, it doesn't really fit. You're just putting it in at an angle. There's somebody on Board Game Geek and maybe Discord, so forgive me, guy, if you're listening to us, that has actually come up with equipment-sized cards for all the survivors that have their blue skill on there, which I think is a really, really clever idea.
how
I know that he at least has all the classic. Now, does he have Paris and does he have, all the newest stuff to come out? Probably not, but he's got a lot of it.
Great. Well, Guy, if you're listening, guy or girl, please let us hit us up, zombiesidefans@gmail.com, and we'd love to promote that a little bit on the next one. And get it on zombiesidefans.com if it's not already on there. I'm going to look for that after this, for sure.
Yeah, sorry I didn't research the name of the person beforehand, but I would like to thank them because I think it's a great idea.
That's really great. All right.
Any other mechanics you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of mechanics in like first edition to second edition, which I didn't plan for. It just came up organically, but I'm glad we covered it because that's kind of important.
Yeah.
We should have planned that, but
there are a few things. Not a whole lot is completely new to this one, but there's a lot that's just we're bringing in some of the more updated stuff from first edition.
Yeah,
that's happened since first edition.
I just put that in like the enemies area, like rush cards and Abomination Fest. We can go into that more there if you guys are cool with that.
Sure. Let's talk about components.
Let's talk about components. So yeah, James's favorite, he already mentioned the plastic dashboard.
Yes, especially if you're not, a nut that, took your Black Plague dashboards and then made classic, Survivor ID cards to fit those, then the plastic dashboards have got to be. I just don't understand how anybody that loves classic can play this and then want to go back to classic after the plastic dashboards. That's just the biggest quality of life, upgrade that there is. And the rings, the rings are not new to Zombicide, but they're new to Modern. Because, they didn't have the rings in Modern. You could use the flat ones from Black Plague, but that's not what they were made for.
Now, I keep meaning to ask you about this, James. You paint everything, all your survivors, and I noticed in pictures I've seen that you use the rings still. And me, as a painter, I don't use the rings because they're painted, and I can see them just well enough. So anyway, I was curious, why do you still use the rings if you paint your miniatures?
Bling. The more stuff that you can use, the better. You got to have shoes to match your pegs. And that's what the rings are, Yeah, accessories. You got to have accessories.
Did you guys have specifically this problem? My rings are like very tight, at least on the core box. And I don't remember this being an issue previously. So this is a second edition thing.
I noticed when I put them on the other day, I was like, yeah, these are really tight. Did I paint this, like the bases of these way too thick or something? But
So Jason, what do you think of the quality of the tokens?
I think they're pretty good. I think, this is the era of Kaman was making good, nice thick cardboard stuff still, and they got a nice sheen to them. So yeah, I think it's pretty good overall from what I've seen. I did manage to snag an old, 3D door set from one of the first edition sets.
Good man.
That's quite nice.
They still have no 3D doors. I have the 3D cards.
Man.
Yeah.
We've got to remedy this.
I'm really surprised it's taken them all the way to White Death to have more than just a single number on one of the spawn points. So I think there's only the one on one of the spawn points, and then a few colored ones, of course. Every time we set up, we always have to be like, okay, this will be the first one, which has the one on it. And then you have to decide, okay, we'll go clockwise around here or whatever.
I think rules say clockwise.
And this was the first edition of the game to have a starting spawn point.
That's right.
And so I went back, to all my other plastic tokens that I normally use and painted a little white, in the middle of all of them. So I would know which one was the starting spawn point.
Nice. I don't like actually these spawn tokens. They've got these like ugly monster faces on them. If you remember in the Invader episode, I pointed out, I was like, hey, did you guys notice that the little faces on the Invader spawn zone tokens are space, like, what's it called? Space Invaders? And we're like, oh my gosh, it is, right. And then I guess they just took that same thing and made like a monstrous face here, and I don't like it. I love the
is
silhouettes.
It not a little zombie face? I've never
those
paid much
attention. Those aren't zombie faces. Those are idiot faces.
No.
That's what those are.
I always assumed it was our little zombie mascot.
It's not.
It's totally a different guy.
It's not.
Yeah, this looks more like an orc or something. It looks stupid to me. I don't like it. I love the silhouettes. That was so evocative of the original edition. Yeah, I usually am like, I don't usually go like, I hate this about this game, but I'm coming strong on this one. And the first edition.
I already talked about how doors are right on the tiles, objectives, and our epic weapon crates also being on the tiles. Huge. It makes setup like.
Oh yeah.
Especially if you're setting up with somebody, only one person needs the book because there's only a handful of things you need the book to place. Most things you can just put right down. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, silliest nitpick ever, but I don't understand why they didn't make the epic weapon backs yellow to match the epic weapon.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. I was thinking the
Did you
same
swap
thing.
them?
It always frustrates my wife a little bit because the colors just kind of dispatch a little bit of like your automatic thinking. And it's just kind of like, seems like an odd decision.
Why did they do that? That's a good point. Because like you may think, oh, when I pull a red objective token, I get to pull the red card, right? It's like, no. When you pull the yellow token, you get the red card, you silly goose.
I guess it's just because that's the only one that's new. Red objectives have always been a thing, and the epic weapons being red has always been a thing. So, well, I believe in first edition they were just more cards, right? They had the same back.
Yeah, and then there was ultra red weapons, but they had the same back as well because you would just
that's right.
shuffle them all in the same deck.
Yes, back in my day, there weren't gray, blue, and red backed cards. They were just all the same backed cards, and it was a
I forgot
nightmare.
we didn't even have starter weapons back then. We had to dig them out of the equipment.
Yes, you just dig them out of the equipment deck like some kind of animal,
Yeah.
one by one.
Pans. I haven't seen much from the pan since first edition.
I think the next time you see pans is in Undead or Alive.
The only reason I can try to come up with why they decided to make red epic weapons or pimp weapon card backs was because you can't see it on the rule book, but the zombie spawn cards are most like dominantly yellow backed. And so maybe they're like, well, we already kind of have a yellow back
I
card.
can definitely see them switching those two if they don't want to switch objectives. And
I would have.
Yeah, actually, I play with a friend that almost always goes to pull an epic weapon for a spawn card instead of the spawn cards.
And spoiler alert, for those of you who don't have Perez yet, I picked that up. I noticed there's yellow backed cards that look just like what I'm talking about in the Perez deck. I'm not even sure what they are yet because I haven't finished painting the miniatures for them.
They're unique weapons.
Okay.
But my one little nitpick of the components is the color of the survivor dashboards. Now, I absolutely love the dashboards. The only reason why I don't like red is because there's a red ring and red peg. I just wish that it was a color that wasn't one of the rings and pegs. Like black, white, just
More
any
white,
color.
gray, yeah.
Yeah, just any color that wasn't one of the 6 colors that are included with the rings and pegs.
This is one of the more vibrant dashboards.
Yeah, with that super hot Barbie pink, magenta, Army of the Dead. Woo! I remember when when pictures first started coming out from when they were showing this off at Gen Con, just showing off components in like a case. And I was salivating for days, like some game nerd that I am, over these like deep red dashboards. I just love them. They're so cool. And yeah, I didn't think about how the red on top of the red is a red problem. It's interesting.
And one last nitpick with them is they changed the scale of them from the Black Plague dashboards. And so these dashboards won't fit in the Zombicide boxes that you can fit the dashboards into with your rings and pegs. Simon actually made Zombicide boxes. They're little plastic boxes, and they're big enough to hold, say, your classic dashboards. You could hold almost every single one that you owned in one of those boxes. And then there's 3 little... It's kind of like a tackle box, 3 little spaces that you can put 3 different colors worth of rings and pegs in. So if you own 2 of those boxes and you say you own Black Plague, then you could put all 6 of your dashboards and all the colors of the rings and pegs for storage.
Oh, actually, that reminds me of another components thing. Is this the first box where we have a little sub box in it to go on top of the tiles? I think it is.
Like the little kind
You
of
guys
pizza.
have anyone talk about? Like you
pizza
open
box thing?
your box. Yeah.
You mean like the Invader?
Did Invader have that?
Yeah. Invader's got like the case, like and like the little button, little pin, little number pad on it. And every time I open that Invader box, I have to go to open it. They did it in Black Plague also, didn't they?
Yeah.
That kind of box. So what's cool about this is the 4th box that they've done. Just teasing. I really like the reference card for the cars. And I guess it's cool that it's double-sided. Is it actually the same rules on both sides for the Pitmobile and the police car?
Wheel was yellow.
Yeah. Yellow green. Let's see. That's probably components. Oh yeah, we didn't talk about miniatures.
Oh, yeah, we could talk about the minis.
Minis.
I think the fatties, future brutes, are a little out of place. This might be more art style, but they look way sillier than everything else, including other versions of fatties from other games.
I think these miniatures are. I think this is the best set of miniatures that they've done for any of the games. I think the sculpts are all awesome. I love the brutes. The first to second down is my favorite sculpt probably in the entire set. I just think she's awesome with her little skirt or tutu. I think she's hilarious. I don't think we would ever get another set where we would have 4 different sculpts for brutes, 4 different sculpts for runners, and obviously 4 different abominations. The standard is 2 runners and 2 brutes, and usually an abomination, unless you're talking about superhero stuff. And then all the different sculpts with the walkers, like every single one of them has personality. You can almost immediately tell who they were. The sculpting just gets better and better.
Yeah, we'll say also, as far as nitpicks go, these abominations also look kind of samey silhouette-wise. If you look at details, you can obviously tell the difference. But this is before they got crazy with abomination designs like they do in the reboot bots and all the expansions.
So, Jason, you playing superhero and this being your other main game that you play, how did you feel in comparison to the value? Do you think both boxes have similar value as far as number of miniatures, tokens, tiles, all that kind of stuff?
Gee, now I'm trying to remember because I got the Kickstarter for Marvel. That was like probably the first Zombicide type game that I actually backed on Kickstarter. I had to hunt down the reboot box, so I appreciated its value of all the different survivors. Every expansion I added to the second edition added. So I'm trying to remember how many heroes there are in the different Marvel core boxes, but I kind of got all of that stuff all at once. So I didn't have the chance to slowly appreciate it, as you should probably.
I have that same problem. I just get it all at once. I have the thing that I need and I want. Nobody gets to go on vacation. Nobody gets new clothes. It's just I get my Zombicides, and that's what happens in this house. I'm kidding. I hope I'm kidding.
I definitely think second edition and Marvel Zombies are similar in that it's got the crossover mission. So if you have both core boxes, it really does kind of help your content to go both ways. And second edition has the 25 different missions, including, as you guys have mentioned, it's the 10 missions from the first edition. And then, of course, you got 12 survivors. It seems like a good value for your money on its own. It's hard for me to compare it to Marvel, and I've played Invader and some of the different fantasy ones. It's hard for me to judge how its value compares. But I feel like second edition is really good just simply because it's got so many missions and a nice chunk of survivors straight out of the box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They started...
It is hard to compare. I keep calling second edition more of the default one, but Marvel Zombies is definitely the furthest removed from that designation of second edition being the base.
The sculpts are great. Like the artistry is great, but also just like the material or the process or the tooling or the whatever, just so much finer quality this time around than previous times. And every other time was better than the time before that. Different type of plastic or whatever. It's phenomenal. And then also, I think, is this the first time that they have the bases that are thicker with like the hollowed out bottoms to them? Invader and just okay. It's interesting. Anyway. Yeah.
I find that interesting because I homebrew and I've used the upgrade pack. So having the first edition, like Berserkers and Toxics, throws off my wanting everything to be the same. So I've actually cut them off the bases and glued them on slightly thicker bases that mimic that similar hollowed out feel, just to help my zombies all feel like they have, there's not a bunch of short Berserkers feeling like they're less than, because their bases are just like a little bit thinner. I don't know.
I've seen on forums and on Discords online plenty of times where people are obsessed with scale to the minutest of detail.
I'm not going to cast any stones about people's mental tics and issues, because I certainly have plenty. But what really impresses me is when you see the people that cut off all their miniatures and then put them on those clear bases. That's really insane looking. Like it looks really cool. I just can't imagine spending all that time to do all that.
And too, I think what...
That does seem pretty high effort.
A benefit to having like a slightly hollowed out underside of the base is you can magnetize them. So if you want to magnetize your storage and do it that way, you could do that now without actually carving into the base like you'd have to do with like first edition. Yeah.
I can play Zombicide upside.
Zero grav.
The other benefit is, believe it or not, they actually are just more stable. I notice they don't tip over once they have those more hollow bases on them as the Black Plague or the first edition type ones do, because it's like the edge is grabbing and so it doesn't tip as easily.
You're having issues with them tipping over?
Not per se, but like, as you reach, you might accidentally knock over the group as you're putting them down. I just noticed that they became more stable once I changed the bases over. So it was kind of like an added benefit.
Cool.
Interesting.
And it's better too for so much to talk about these bases. It's better too for base painting schemes. Cause like you were saying, Jason, I also do this thing where all my standard walkers are just gray bases. And then all the runners are always red rimmed on the bases. And the fatties are yellow and the abominations are orange. So I have my whole color system, and it works a lot better in the second edition, or just the thicker bases like across these games. I also wanted to add that I love the silhouettes of these miniatures are really great. Most of them, is so much more distinguishable because of their unique silhouettes. However, I do have a big problem on the survivor side with the kids. So like Tiger Sam and Odin, I could barely tell the difference between those miniatures. Like I need to really up the contrast in the painting on those guys so that I could tell them apart better. Same as like Lily and Lou. They're just, to me anyway, in my eyes, they're kind of similar enough, or like it just throws me a little bit. And then the Abominations are a huge problem. They're all just like big hulking, basically the same shape of dude with, I wasn't sure if you said all of it, but yeah, there's the same big hulking dude with, spiky parts sticking out of them. And just like, there needs to be,
it was the first time Abominations were so distinct from each other in the core game. So I get why it took them a little while to do all the unique body shapes that we see now. It is.
Yeah.
You take one out of the bag, you have to, because especially me, I don't paint him. I have to really look like, is that patient zero? Can I see his little bag?
And I really appreciate how much bigger and rounder the fatties are than they were in the previous iteration, because it's just that much easier to tell what you're grabbing for and what you're putting on the table and what you're looking at and separating and moving and all of that.
So my only nitpick with the miniatures is there's one runner that I really don't like, and it's hard to tell in this picture because it's misleading. But the very first runner on the left, he actually is on 2 feet, not one like you see here. If he was on 1 foot, I would really like him a lot better. But he basically he's on 2 feet and he stands up. So he's just kind of like a tall walker. So he's definitely the guy that gets missed the most if he's in a group of other walkers. We've run into problems in games where we didn't notice there was a runner in a zone, so we didn't account for it. And then all of a sudden we're like, hey, that's actually a runner. And then it causes us problems. So obviously, if you're painting your bases different colors, that would certainly help. This particular runner is not.
Here's where my brilliant coloring scheme comes in, because runners and fatties, darker gray.
Right.
Slightly darker gray.
Is this the first Zombicide where they made the runners that much like a different plastic color than the walkers?
I think in they're also slightly darker.
I think Invader did it. It's hard for me to say. I paint the things.
Yeah, I think this is the first one where they had different colored plastic. Normally, in all the previous versions of Zombicide, with maybe the exception of the Goblin runners, the runners are usually pretty darn easy to tell because they always put them on one leg, and they're always in a much more dynamic pose than the walkers. This one, like I said, just the picture here on the rulebook just doesn't do the miniature. It's not actually what the miniature looks like.
That's funny. Yeah, I cannot go without having my runners with red bases. It's one of my favorite features of the game. It's my little paint job of red bases for the runners so I can tell what's what.
I know what
do you guys have anything to talk about for... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I know it's probably for practical reasons, but think about standard media for zombies. Zombies are always got both hands forward reaching, and it's kind of sad that none of the models have quite like that feature, but it's very much more practical to store them the way they are, so I won't complain about it.
That makes sense.
So how are we feeling about the art style, the graphic design of Zombicide 2nd Edition?
I didn't even notice it was different until we did first edition. So it is quite substantially different than it was in first edition. And I just wasn't paying any attention at all, I guess. But I do like it. It's very sharp.
Yeah, it's mostly by the same artist, and his style has evolved, and it should, because the whole game is kind of evolving. And I really like it. I agree with your assessment that it looks sharp. It looks clean. The colors that they get to do over his artwork are obviously very talented. But yeah, I really like the equipment cards. I like the more 3D look of the equipment cards versus the flat standard look of the classic equipment cards. I like more how these equipment look like they're coming at you. I like that.
They're more dynamic. They're kind of more rendered than the previous ones. Yeah. Everything feels very lively and very vibrant. And sorry, go ahead.
I don't know.
And graphic design wise, I mentioned how they made spawn cards a little cleaner and they made equipment cards a little cleaner as far as graphic design goes.
Yeah, I really like
you don't have to look at a little silhouette of a zombie to figure out what you're spawning. Yeah.
The character designs are very they exude a lot of flavor in how they look and stuff. I could tell stories. As I look at the character art, I kind of remember different games I've played and different stories that I can vaguely remember of how things went with one character or another is pretty good. And yeah, to your point, Schmedley, about the silhouettes, I noticed later playing with some of the older ones as I expanded outward and was trying different ones to see what else might be good for my Zombicide shelf. I really like the art, the big art of the single type of zombie on the one card. Just made it a lot easier than having to identify more of a silhouette or a less clear kind of image. So they've nailed the graphic with second edition, I would say.
Yeah, it's still very stylistic. And I really like on the ID cards how, you've got their name in the front and then the enlarged colorful version of the survivor name in the back there. And then all the vibrant colors and everything. Yeah, everything feels updated and fresh from first edition. And even if there wasn't a first edition, this feels like an updated and fresh modern game. It's great.
I always forget looking at her card, Elle or Ellie here, that she's not a kid. She looks like she should be a kid.
I know.
What adult has that face?
In the campaign, they only showed her face when they were doing the initial teaser graphics. And they were talking about kids. I was like, oh, that's one of the kid characters.
Ryan, earlier you were talking about how you don't maybe like the kids as much. Did I hear you right on that?
Yeah. So something about having kids in a zombie game just kind of felt, I don't know, poor taste or bad taste is a stronger version than what I mean about it. I remember watching a Dice Tower review with Z Garcia, great guy. We should have him on the show because he's reviewed every Zombicide game. I should hit him up. Hey Z, come on the show. And he was like, yeah,
one the Living Dead or something.
Yeah, the way he said it's kind of icky. I was like, yeah, kind of is that, and the whole pimp thing and the whole fatty thing and all this stuff.
In fairness, these kids seem like they're kind of older teenagers. It's not like what you're running around with as 8-year-olds with guns.
Yeah. Well, I think it was kind of off the back of Stranger Things being super popular at this time still. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get a picture of a kid here. Do they even have an art of the kid in the book?
We could look at their models.
Yeah. Go back here. And so, when I played in preparation for this episode, I just randomly picked survivors this time just so I could play things that I wouldn't normally play, including kids. It was cool that they were different than the others, and I could definitely see some really cool stories forming in your mind, some emergent stories, which is part of the fun for me. But if I had a choice, I would rather have 12 adults than 6 adults and 6 kids, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I know you're not alone in that opinion, so it's worth mentioning on this podcast where you guys break every last element down, and I love it for that.
Big time. How do you feel about the kids?
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. I have so many survivors that I feel like there's just a lot to choose from. But it's interesting. I had noticed a few times when the subject comes up on the internet that some people say, oh, it's great because I have kids that play Zombicide with me and they like to play someone they kind of think might represent them more. So
nice.
I can see both sides of it, honestly.
That's always great to be reminded of that representation matters.
Mechanically speaking, I do like the kids. We talked a lot during Invade about how when the class system was first introduced, it wasn't fully utilized, and that soldiers' drawback wasn't enough to justify them getting an extra health. I think once per turn slippery is such a good trade-off for one less health on the other side. I think once per turn slippery rocks as far as situations that you find yourself in. And like I said, they do seem to be older kids. If one of them was a baby, I might have a problem. But there are stories to tell about gangs of kids trying to survive in a zombie apocalypse. There's some potential, I think.
Yeah. It's not out there. It reflects what would be real life. Like there would be kids out there. So you might actually, on the other side of that, be like, from all of the other Zombicide games that ever came out, like, why are there no kids in this world? What's going on here?
Yeah, I think just thematically, you can look at the Walking Dead TV show with Carl.
Yeah.
You know, somewhat of a popular character. You know, as he grows up to, you know, from a young boy to a teenager, becoming a zombie killer. It makes sense to me thematically to have this. Rules mechanic wise, I'm 100% in the boat of Schmedley. These should be your first characters you're looking at playing. If you can't handle taking 2 wounds, and you've probably done something wrong and you're going to lose the game anyway. So, you know, the 2 wounds versus 3 is just not a factor to me. The slippery is going to get you out of trouble way more than the extra wounds going to save your life. There's just not a lot of things that do multiple wounds in one hit like Invader or in Green Horde. As we talked about in Invader, the problem there is you got an Abomination that does 3 wounds. Well, can you survive that? And same thing in Green Horde. If something does 2 wounds to one character, can you survive that? But in this game, that's not how it works. You can divide up your hits as evenly as you want.
And I think when you're talking about pop culture stuff that may have influenced us, you know, think about The Last of Us with Ellie as a predominant character, you know, who was she?
No spoilers.
Wow.
I will say, as far as the class system goes for kids outside the core box, it's still not super utilized. How many more kids do we even get? Do either of you know off the top of your head?
2.
Yeah.
2?
Kevin
And
McAllister.
the only other class What was that?
Oh, Kevin McAllister and the girl from Poltergeist. That's what I can tell you. I remember those 2.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll go over them next episode.
Yeah.
And then I think the only other class besides kid is the Soups from the boys. Are there any other classes in second edition besides those 2?
Yes, there's Ghostbusters.
Oh, the Ghostbusters do have a class. Because I know the President have a unique ability between them, but they don't have a class like I can.
It's not really a class, as you say.
There's a character called Phil who's got like some kind of police class, but I mean, pretty one-off things, I think.
That was so odd to hear you say, like, there's a character named Phil.
So
it's like he's the classic Phil that we were all freaking out during the campaign. Yeah.
How could they do this to him?
I know. We're all freaking out.
The nostalgia and the understanding that you guys do.
Okay.
I believe he was swapped out so there'd be for the gender ratio, right?
Right.
Was that the reason? Yeah.
Yeah.
The funny thing for me with second edition is that I bought it thinking I would sell this game because once I have Marvel Zombies, I wouldn't need it anymore. So like, it's so funny to like, later I'm looking through the cards. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember hearing about Phil, you know, like I kind of like am getting an education on Zombicide history.
Well, Phil, he was so epic in first edition. He was so important in first edition because he started with the pistol. And just about everybody else got frying pans that had to hit on a 5 or better.
Yeah, that
was a big deal.
Also, each character had a set weapon they had to have, huh?
No, just some.
No.
Very few.
That was his blue skill.
That was such a benefit that it took up his blue skill at the time.
Yeah, kind of a big deal. I'm kind of a big deal on Phil. So Schmedley, who's your favorite survivor in the second edition core box?
So in first edition, it was Josh because I like Slippery so much. But with the addition of the kids, that pool is kind of diluted as far as Slippery goes. So I think it's moved on to either Ned or Astara because I think searching, especially without additional things, searching is such a big thing if you have an Abomination on board. So Ned has a free search action, and Astara, who's one of the kids who might take it, can search as many times as she wants, but she doesn't get an extra skill for it. She's just not limited to once per turn. Yeah. What about you, James?
Nothing in this edition has changed and diminished Amy. Free move action plus the rest of her skill tree still makes her one of the most powerful characters in this set. And as far as the kids go, I absolutely love Lou. She's great. I mean, the charge, getting the free movement up to 2. It's not as good as Bloodlust, melee, obviously, but it's still really good, and it's still a free action. As far as miniatures go, I just absolutely love this version of Ned. Ned having almost the entire thing in the kitchen sink on him is just awesome. Just looking at his artwork, you can
It's
see all
very
his little
in-character
bits,
for
and
Ned.
and his sculpt is just great. And I really liked how they tried to pay attention to keeping a lot of the weapons what you can actually get in the deck. I always appreciate when they try to tie the equipment deck to what the characters can actually have on them. I really, really enjoy that. Jason?
Ned is definitely my favorite. The free search action is just always useful and amazing. I think it's funny because I always choose Ned because he looks cool. He reminds me of like Joel from The Last of Us. And I'm like, man, I got to be this. He never ends up working out the way I want. I had a game where Doug is over there just always, and he's holding two guns in his miniature, and he's got like two knives, and he was always in like rough situations where zombies were coming into his horde, and it was all down to Doug doing things, and he doesn't look as battle hardened as Ned does. And it's just funny how the game sometimes just deals things differently to you than the character. You're like, this guy's going to be the guy with a sniper rifle taking care of stuff. And it was just, it's so funny because I think that's how I always play. I'm like, I want to be Ned. And I end up with Doug just in the street with a kukri trying to just survive to the next round.
Doug has always been rough. Like, is he still matching set on blue here?
He's still
Yes,
matching
yeah.
set.
Yeah, that's
He's
the
the same
worst.
as Doug. He's the same. If he didn't like him before, you're not going to like him now.
Do you have a favorite survivor, Ryan?
Yeah, it's Ostara.
Ostara too?
Yeah, I really like Ostara, and it's almost like, it's funny, Jason, I'm glad you said that. It really speaks to how that works out for me too, because I always love to get Ostara if I'm doing random, or if I'll probably pick her because of all that search. She could search many times as she has actions, which is incredible. Like, I love that the novelty of how it breaks that rule that's been so set in stone for so many years in these games. But anyway, it never really works out. Doesn't really work out the way I think it's going to. Like, I'm always like, oh yeah, I'm going to sit there and search with her and find all the best gear. But then it becomes a problem because she becomes a bottleneck of stuff. It's like, oh, what do I trade for this and trade for that? And then she doesn't get experience at all because she's just busy searching all the time. And then like the action economy just goes way down of having to search for stuff and trade them off to friends and move around to do that. And she's not keeping up with the group because of it, and da 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 da. So even still, like, it still comes in quite clutch in a lot of situations for her to just be able to spam search a car or a building to get us to the finish line. So I really enjoy that. And I had to look it up. So here is Ostara, is a neo-pagan and Wiccan spring festival celebrated around spring equinox. Typically martyred.
You mentioned their names. All of the kids do have fairly strange names and titles. I've always wondered if there's something to that, like if they just gave fake names to the adults or something.
Yeah. Earlier, Google gave me different results. Ostara is like a goddess name, a Germanic goddess of spring and dawn. That's what I found earlier. And so that's interesting. It's like, you got Ostara and Odin, these different god and goddess names. It's kind of fun.
So it's funny, Ryan, you mentioned basically all of the negatives about her, and that's why she's one of my least favorite characters to play. With playing with a bunch of other people, if you get stuck with her, then everyone's like, well, you should just be searching. So you just spend the whole game just sitting there searching.
Oh, geez,
it's
that's
not
no
that fun. You don't go around killing zombies, and the only way you're getting leveled up is if you go take the objectives. And so she to me is like a fun killjoy. She's just not fun to play because of that. And then also, I'm just not a big fan of +1 max range on Lily. Lily is just another character that I would not pick given the choice.
Oh yeah, that's not a very good one, is it? Yeah, like, I think I gravitate towards Ostara, well, because I'm playing solo almost all the time, or at least I'm controlling multiple survivors definitely all the time. So yeah, I haven't taken an issue with that. And also, like, in games when there's asymmetric abilities, I tend to go for support characters. Like, we were talking about Massive Darkness before. I really like the Paladin just because of how great a support character that is. I get it's a lot of fun for me to coordinate with other people, especially because I'm usually hosting a game night with new people. And so I think she's great for that. But yeah, I agree that she's not great. And Wanda was my favorite from first edition, but they nerfed her big time.
How do you guys feel about 2 zones per move versus sprint?
Oh yeah, 2 zones per move was too powerful. And so I loved it. Sprint, just being able to move 2 to 3 zones once per turn, is not as good. So I don't love it, but I still really like it.
I've always interpreted it as more of a side grade. If you need to go exactly 3 zones away, sprint is better. And if you need to go 4 zones away, they're the same. So 2 zones per move is really only the same if you need to go across the board, which does happen sometimes, but not as often as you might think.
I don't feel strongly one way or the other about it. I kind of got used to playing Sprint with Season 3 Rue Morgue because it was a starting character that started with Sprint. So that kind of got you on that path. And then if you played Fantasy, there was several characters at Blue that had Sprint. So to me, Sprint seemed fine. And then once you get her up to Orange and give her Slippery, well, then I can start seeing where the 2 zones per movement might come into play a little bit more than Sprint would, but Sprint's still good.
I do think original Wanda at Orange could do 3 zones per move. Wasn't that her other Orange, or was that I read?
Don't get me lying on that one.
She, like, if you remember when I played that campaign that was like super easy, barely an inconvenience on like the last mission of it with Wanda just, getting up to Orange, because you started the mission with her at Orange, I think, or Red. And I just won in like 5 minutes because of her insane movement.
Yeah, them either Orange or Red, she had +1 zone, which made her 3 zones per move. And that was insane.
It was too powerful. And, if it wasn't for first edition, I'd be like, Wanda's amazing. And she is. I still really like her, and I love this character. The character design is amazing. And how did she get that eye patch? What happened? So,
yeah. I do like that a year later, she's still in her work uniform.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, if you really miss that ability, the Chronicle Survivors has a guy on a bike, and he gets a + zone per move.
Oh, nice.
It's super fun.
I haven't played with that guy yet.
Yeah, I haven't played with any of the Chronicles guys. All right, I think we pretty much covered it all.
Proof. I think we got it. We talked about Phil a couple times, actually, and if you're like, what are you talking about, Phil? So Phil was part of first edition. We alluded to that, but he's also was a Kickstarter exclusive that you got with your core. If you back the Kickstarter, you could only get Phil that way.
And he got a lot better.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he did.
The other 5 original guys are all in here. Starting with the pistol isn't a big deal anymore.
A ranged damage 2 at Blue.
And his cop ability, the driving thing is nice, but really the benefit of that is that him and everybody else can search the cop car and ignore ARG cards.
I was just reading the synopsis again, because you keep referencing this game is like a year later, but I'm not seeing it here. Where does it say that?
Does it not say that? I could have sworn it said that somewhere. Did I make that up?
You might have.
I might have just made that up.
Fans of the podcast, write in and let us know when you think said takes place.
Is it is there an initial blurb, or is this the first blurb? Am I thinking of one of the campaigns, maybe in Washington?
I think you are.
Maybe ZC is a year later or something.
Fort Hendricks and Washington DC, they definitely do kind of try to outline when things kind of were happening. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Let's talk about the equipment cards.
Yeah.
And the equipment. Where is it? So I guess we talked about it a little bit. We've got our standard equipment deck, and we've got our pimp or epic weapon deck, and our starting weapon deck. And there's just, there's no pans. Pans are gone. And I think that everything's sort of amped up. The whole game is amped up, and everything's, gets into the action a lot faster.
There's a list of the equipment on page 4, just FYI.
So I love that they have the cards on the equipment deck. What I don't love is my brain does not love that, some of the games are I have to read the card every time because I have all these different Zombicide games, and that's my problem, I know. This is first world problems. And some of them are your search stops here. Some of them are, okay, draw another card after this card. And this is a your search stops here version, by the way.
Yeah. Schmedley, what were your thoughts on the equipment? Do you find them to be overpowered? Do you think it's balanced?
It is easier to find. There's no crafting, which if you've never played first edition, that means nothing to you. You can kind of just find Molotovs, and it's fairly easy, and it's good that it's fairly easy. It definitely contributes to this being easier than first edition, the same way that access to the epic weapons does. But I don't think it's overpowered. I think they're just going for a different game feel of being more like people ripping through zombies as an action movie rather than avoiding them in a survival movie.
So I'd like to push back a little bit on the idea that this deck makes the game easier than Classic. I really don't think that it does. I understand that there's a few more damage to weapons in this game, but keep in mind that the hit order in this game is different from Classic. You have to shoot brutes before you shoot walkers in this game. And if you want to tell me, oh, but the sniper rifle is damage 2 in this game, but it was only damage 1 in Classic, Well, the sniper feature isn't going to help you against brutes because that's what you'd hit first anyway. So, you're only using the sniper to take out walkers and runners, which you would be doing that anyway with a damage 1 sniper rifle from Classic. I mean, there's no more machetes, there's no more chainsaws, there's no more shotguns than there were in Classic. The epic weapon deck, to me, is the only thing that makes these weapons more powerful. The basic deck doesn't. Just as an example, so in first edition at Blue, if you went through that entire deck at Blue, the most brutes or fatties you could draw would be 3. In this game, it's 11. And at Yellow in Classic, the most brutes you could draw is 1. So they've ramped up the danger level, I think, way commensurate to the danger level of the equipment deck. I don't think that the equipment deck in this game makes it any easier than Classic.
I think specifically, because we touched on just how many more weapons in general there are, I think getting rid of bottles and gasoline and the scope is really what makes it easier, just because you're so much more likely to land on a weapon, not so much that the weapons themselves are better.
And to me, that just speeds up the game. That doesn't necessarily make it easier, it just makes it faster, because you don't have to hunker down looking for as many equipment.
Like I said, it also makes you get to Molotovs faster, which is great, because that's like the biggest stalemate you could have in first edition, is because the Abomination is not the best at catching up to you generally.
Right.
Yeah, it was painful in first edition days having to hunt through the deck to find a gasoline tank and a bottle, and then combine them into a Molotov. So it was part of the fun, but it's also like when you get it, just straight up get a card here, like, oh, what a relief. It's so much easier and better that way.
Jason, what do you think of the equipment?
I like it overall. Again, here's what I will say. Like, for me, strangely enough, the equipment is what makes Zombicide so fun. Adding at least a little extra fun, but it's something about searching for equipment in a zombie game, and it just makes it super fun. And yeah, I like the equipment deck overall. Obviously, my favorite weapon would probably come from the epic weapons, right? And I'm a big shotgun person, so the automatic shotgun probably my favorite gun. Do you guys have a favorite weapon in any of these decks?
I can tell you what's not my favorite is that damn sawed off. I hate that weapon so much because you have to reload it. And the timing it's never fun to waste an action reloading the stupid thing. And it's always the last action for me. And I just hate it. I hate it so much. And I do really like this deck though. I feel like this deck is really well crafted, really well balanced. And like the pace of the game, it all works really well. But I hate those sawed-offs, and I hate that plenty of bullets and plenty of shells always go to the wrong people. But you know what? That's all part of the fun. It shouldn't always be perfect every time. And so I do enjoy that. I'm still pretty partial to the chainsaw. I don't know why, but less so in this version than I was in first edition. Like in the first edition, I loved the chainsaw. Like every time I get the chainsaw, like, let's roll this chainsaw. And in this game, I don't like it as much. I don't know why, as far as like the standard equipment cards.
My favorite weapon, I did have a fun time with the Army Sniper Rifle, the Book Club Mission, but I think overall my favorite is still either the Gunblade or the shotgun. I love dual melee and ranged weapons just in general. I think they're always very fun for no reason other than I think they're cool. So I got to give it to those.
Yeah, the gun blades are hard to beat. Getting 2 shots that can kill brutes, getting 4 dice in melee that can kill brutes. It's just such a better version of the Golden Kukri. Obviously the Golden Kukri is great. And that would be the only thing I would say about the chainsaw is if I've got a chainsaw or Golden Kukri, normally I want to keep the Golden Kukri up because obviously I roll dice poorly, so I need better chances to hit. But then it also seems like every single time that's the character that I need to open doors with. And so, the Golden Kukri takes a back seat because, the chainsaw does both of those things. So yeah, the chainsaw is still great if you can roll dice. Nothing's gone wrong there. And the Army Sniper Rifle, as far as a gun, has got to be about the best gun that you can have in the game.
And speaking of rolling dice and opening doors, like, is this the first one where you didn't have to roll a dice to open a door? Like I know Black Plague, you had to roll dice to see if you got to open the door.
No,
so Classic didn't have that rule. Classic, you just automatically open doors with a door opener.
my favorite has to be the Army sniper rifle. Like anything that's 3 or better on the die roll for accuracy is good in my book.
But not the
Especially
sawed-offs.
Yeah, not the sawed-offs. Yeah, F those sawed-offs.
Is it the Evil Twins? I think mine also hit on a 3+.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 2 dice at a 3+.
Yeah, well, ever since Marvel Zombies, I'm always looking for 3+ attacks. Because in that game, it's just like, it's only ever 3+ or 4+. It's like, okay, 3+ is better.
I think there are 2+ in Marvel. They're usually 1 die.
Yeah, there are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ryan, I'm going to sell you on sawed-offs here. Give Tiger Sam 2 sawed-offs. Now you're getting 6 dice at a 3+. I don't know how you can get much better than that.
Tiger Sam's also really good with the sniper rifle. She's
Oh,
the one
yeah.
that had
Yep.
the army
Yep.
sniper rifle.
Okay, I'll try it next time. Let you know. Since I always draw sawed-offs. The devil. And you used to, oh man, you used to have in your plenty of shells that you didn't have to reload it, right? Didn't that?
No.
No?
No.
What? What am I thinking? Maybe I just thought of it that way because they were a reroll.
Yeah, so there was 2 different kind of ammos for shotguns in Classic. There was heavy ammo and then spare change. And spare change would turn your sawed-offs into damage 2 weapons.
So there wasn't a way that you could turn off the reload in the sawed-offs in first edition?
There was the skill, free reload.
Probably what I'm thinking of then. Glad I didn't just make it up. All right.
I think that's pretty much everything on equipment.
Zombies.
So what about the other deck?
Zombies. So in this game, they've, I think, introduced rush cards. It's the first time they had rush cards in a Zombicide game. Yeah, rush cards are awesome. It's spawn
This is the
whatever
exact
number of
same thing. Rush cards are
zombies.
huge.
Say again.
I said rush cards are huge. The first time I read rush cards, like just thumbing through the rules, I kind of thought they'd be nothing because it's just like, it's just like a worse extra activation, but they're very cool.
Rush cards are just, you spawn and then activate them immediately. And it was such an awesome new concept. And it's cool because it's different, than just the mundane spawning, but it's also not so detrimental as an extra activation. I like how it's right in the middle.
Yeah, I see the example because I feel like they matter the most in buildings because then you can't quite plan where the zombies are going to show up in buildings like it seems like you might be able to with the dark zones.
Well, also, the thing about the rush cards is the obvious effect of you don't want to open a door to a dark zone unless you have to, right? And especially unless you've got people to come back you up to deal with the rush, what could rush out of the building. But what I really find over the course of the game that rush cards have the biggest effect on is creating large hordes of zombies. For example, let's say at blue, you pull 4 walkers, second turn they move out in the zone, and then when you pull another card, it's 6 walker rush. Now you've got a zone with 10 walkers in it all of a sudden. So the rush cards are really good about building up large hordes of zombies.
Nice variability, nice tension that can bring.
Yeah, it also just makes it that much more dangerous to stand right next to a spawn zone.
I can't appreciate enough that they were still putting the numbers of the cards in the corners on the cards there. I still wish they would put like little icons to indicate what product this is from. Fantasy Flight Games is excellent at that, at all of their games. SEMA doesn't always do that. They did it with Black Plague stuff. Why don't they do it with the other ones?
The fantasy line has that. I'm not quite sure why it doesn't translate to any of the other ones. And then is one more comparison to Classic. We lose the sewer mechanic. The rush cards kind of replace the sewer mechanic.
Yeah.
I think overall it's better. I kind of miss the sewer cards just because it was something else you had to plan for, but there weren't that many sewer cards. The other thing I would say that makes this better just from a visual aesthetic is the cards are so much different looking from all the other cards that when you see that yellow background, whereas the sewer cards, you really had to pay attention for that little sewer icon.
I'm sure I've missed it at some point.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure anybody that's played that game has missed it at some point.
Yeah, that was cool. If I had to pick one over the other, then I would pick the rush ones. But yeah, I would rather have both, to be honest. Forgot about that. Sewer cards. They just come up from the manholes that are just, on the board. You didn't even notice that they were there. But it was problematic too, because often at times you'd have miniatures over the top of the manholes and you wouldn't know that they were there at all. And you'd be like, oh, later on, be like, oh, should have put a zombie there earlier.
The
Whoops.
rules were confusing too, because like you spawned them from all manholes in tiles, in spaces that are on tiles where a survivor is, and that was
Right.
always confusing.
Yeah, that always took a minute to re-explain to everybody. Yeah.
It's a pretty simple spawn deck. You guys want to talk about Abomination Fest? Abomina Fest?
It's called Abomination Fest officially, but you can call it what you want. Yeah, it's really cool. Every time you spawn it's an optional rule at the end of the book, or a standard rule if you're James, when you're from Texas. If you already have an abomination on the board, when you draw an abomination card, then you give the existing abominations extra activations, and then you draw another card and you spawn a new abomination, rather than just like one abomination only on the board. So it's great. You have the 4 different unique abominations here. It's a no-brainer to be able to play this rule. Maybe like the first time when you're worried you don't want to lose because you're introducing people to the game. You don't want them to go home and be like, why'd you make me play that game? That was too hard because of all the abominations. But I think it's a great addition. What do you think, Schmedley?
I don't think I've ever played with it. I will say it's another rule, extra activation and then spawn, that they took from Invader, which as we all know is the superior Zombicide. And I will say, like, this is another part of second edition just kind of being more abomination focused, where I think especially when you start adding stuff, if you want any chance to see, you know, the new Batman cards that you just put in there, you have to allow more abominations to be on the board. It does make one of the extra abominations, I think, useless, because I think there's a reboot box one where its whole thing is that other abominations can be there when it's there.
Oh, yeah.
That's only part of that rule, actually.
It is only part of the rule? Okay, good.
Yeah, because the rest of it is it can't be killed until all abominations on the board are killed. So it actually makes it almost invulnerable.
This is Black Dog?
No, it's Bear Man Boar.
Bear Man Boar, you're right.
Though
We
there are
Black Dog, yeah.
some, there's
Well,
some
we'll talk about it next time.
There are some Ghostbuster abominations that say you can have multiple abominations on the board.
Them two, the two, Vince Clortho and the other one.
The dogs.
Yeah, it's smart. It's good planning. I love when they do that. And then also, even in the book, they're like, tailor the abomination deck, get Urban Legends pack. So you can get the Sewer Croc and the Alien and the Chupacabra and the Killer Clown. So that's cool. And they've done that in other products
While
too.
you're on this page, do you guys have any thoughts at all on the 4 different abominations?
I do.
Go for it.
So I think the most dangerous abomination on here by far is the Hobomination. I don't know, that was hard for me to say.
Yeah.
Just because it is easy to get trapped with him from time to time, and him not allowing anybody to do combat actions. The biggest fear is you get trapped with him with a couple of other zombies, and now you don't have enough actions to get away from him, and you can't kill any of the zombies in your zone because you can't do combat actions. So he's a real menace in the right situation. The Abominable Wild eats Molotovs. That's usually not a big deal at blue and yellow, but when you start getting to orange and red and you get some real hordes out there, if he's got, say, 10 walkers or 4 runners with him and he eats your Molotov, well, now, or do you have enough to deal with what is left? But I'm a cop. I could take or leave him, and then patient 0 is just patient 0. Jason, what do you think?
You covered it, James. Like, yeah, I think it's cool that they have these 4 abominations, but if you could add abominations from expansions, I recommend it. So yeah, it's cool. Cool, definitely though that they added 4, and they are slightly different. But I think as you guys, I can remember we were talking about before we started recording, they're not all that different totally. But yeah, I think you're right, James. The hobo guy is definitely the worst one.
I think it even says that right there. Do you have any thoughts, Ryan, before I do my whole spiel?
Yeah, I found in my missions recently, I found Abominable Wild to be more of a hindrance. Maybe just the idea of his ability if his Molotov will only kill him and not anybody else in his zone, an issue. But I guess at the end of the day, it wasn't that much of an issue. And Abomination seems to be always the last one that comes out. So I haven't faced him a whole lot, at least not recently.
I will say, I don't think any of their abilities have come up, maybe the Abominable Wilds once, have come up a single time all the times I've played them. I don't think I've ever been trapped in a zone with Abomination. I don't think I've ever been in a situation where Abominacop wouldn't be the first one taken out anyway, usually because it's a Molotov. And I think of these, my favorite, which would make it my favorite of zombie in the core box, might be Patient Zero. He doesn't do anything. I just think he looks the coolest.
He looks really cool.
Yeah.
You know, I agree. I think they really pulled their Abomina punches here on these Abominations.
Maybe it was because they were already, because it dropped immediately with this Urban Legends pack, and that was the most interesting one. It seems weird because this is the game where the Abominations get crazy. It's so weird that the core box ones are pretty underwhelming.
How did you guys feel about the number of miniatures in the game? Did you find yourself running out of them a lot?
I didn't.
No, I didn't. For the missions that we played for this podcast, I only stuck with what was in the core box. But normally when we play games, we play with our other standard zombies from Classic. So running out of a Classic zombie would be a pretty rare thing.
Yeah, I found it interesting that between this one and Marvel Zombies and White Death, if you just take the core boxes as is, I've ran out of Marvel Zombies and had to deal with that, and White Death, I've had that happen. But for some reason with second edition, even when I've taken out some of my expansion stuff for the purpose of this mission, I never ran out of zombies. And I thought that was odd. I expected to finally encounter that, but yeah. Maybe there are too many miniatures in the box.
So there's 2 more brutes and there's 2 more runners than your standard core box. And to me, I feel like that's the right number. I really felt the pressure in Deceased Gotham City Outbreak.
Yes.
We talked about that.
They're only having 10 brutes and 10 runners. I really think that's too few. And then the same thing with Army of the Dead. You definitely feel the lack of miniatures in that set as well.
And I think both those you just cited, I was thinking the same thing. They're newer games. And to me, I like the way that those are, the numbers on those and the way that shakes out. I like that there's more tension and it's more of a threat, scarier, literally scarier, freakier when you're like, oh, we're going to run out of miniatures again. They're going to extra activate because we're out of miniatures. But yeah, not in this game. I was right up against it a couple of times very recently in here in second edition. That was good. But yeah, I almost would like a little bit more. And it's really weird because we already went through like how many more numbers of zombies there are on these spawn cards. I guess it's just you're just a lot more efficient killing machines in this game than the deck has the tendency to run out. Or not the deck, but the miniatures. So yeah, I wish that the miniatures would run out a little bit more than this.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anybody come up with that idea on how to make the game more difficult. Usually you get things like cut down the spawn deck, take away this, take away that, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody put up the idea of take away so many of your miniatures, like take away X amount of this miniature type and then play. But that would be an interesting way to do it.
So setup of this game was one of the major features when they came out with the initial Kickstarter to launch it. And this extends to the core game the same as it would if you got the Kickstarter, which is that it's a much faster setup. They said some number that I was like, oh, really? That's quite incredulous, but I feel like they earned it because it's so much faster than first edition setup was with all the doors that you had to place, all the door tokens you had to place, and the objective tokens and all of that. Because on this one, the tiles, they're pre-printed on the tiles exactly where the objectives and the pimp weapon or epic weapon decks or crates go. So you don't have to think about it. You just have to put it there. You have to see what the colors are that they want you to put in on the key in the mission, but otherwise you just serve them right up and it's a lot faster. Is there anything that you guys feel like, do you agree the setup is pretty streamlined here and or that they could have made better
definitely.
or they made worse on setup?
I think this is probably the best setup gets. I think it pretty much is the same from here on. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I think it's by far better than any previous version that we've seen. I mean, you can make the case that Invader's easier to set up because they don't really use doors, but With this one, if you have just one other set of hands to help you, once you get the tiles laid out, then it shouldn't take you more than 2 minutes to set this game up because everybody can see where to put out the crates, the objectives, and you don't have to put out the doors until you open them. If you don't want to, you can still put out the door tokens if you want, but you don't have to.
Normally, I only put them up when broken.
I do because I use the 3D doors. My gaming group is a little bit older, and so we have a little bit harder time seeing where the doors are on the tiles. So just going ahead and having the doors out there helps us see that. But again, you see where they're supposed to be. So it's so much quicker than previous missions. Nobody has to look at the map going, okay, this is where the doors go. You see where the doors go. I absolutely understand the homebrew community out there that are gnashing their teeth saying, but now I can't customize my stuff because you know where the doors are.
That was a big thing. That was a big thing
I
back
get
then.
it. But it's just not that big a thing in the end. It's really not.
It doesn't come up that much.
And if you want another door somewhere, you just put it there. You put the tile there or the token there. And you have the door wherever you want. I remember those big backlash, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's right. That does kind of suck. But in real life, IRL, it's not a problem.
I think there is at least one mission where you put down a door that isn't on the tile. Do you happen to know, James? I feel like I've done that.
There's a bunch of them.
There's a few where you put doors like inside of buildings to kind of separate buildings. So you're going to get, door tokens for those. But yeah, I mean, the maps are just as customizable, as you want.
I agree. I think the map tiles, again, my original reason for buying Zombicide is I thought, I could use the map tiles with Marvel Zombies because the streets kind of all look similar. And so there's plenty of options for customizers like me who want to do crazy things. So yeah.
Back in my day, in first edition, you'd have to, the map would show you every single spot you had to put a closed door because they were just walls. There were no doors. There were no external doors. It was so
we keep
tedious.
talking about White Death, and I'm sure we'll go over it when we touch on White Death proper, but the time crash tiles are like the craziest thing to happen to custom missions, that we now have like actual printed tiles that are half fantasy and half modern.
I need them. I need them so bad.
Schmedley, you're making Ryan have FOMO. So I do.
Big time.
I don't have it yet either.
Before
Simon seems to be going back in the other direction if you go by Paris, because Paris doesn't have epic weapon crates or objectives printed on the tiles.
Oh.
I haven't played through the campaign, so I don't know how much that affects the campaign, but they do seem to be going back in the other direction. So who knows?
So the only campaign I've played was ZC, and it also didn't have objectives printed, but that's because the objectives had the tile art print. So like it might be something like that. I don't remember if it had epic.
Well, they're the objective cards instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were no objective crates, so they didn't need to be printed on the tiles.
And sometimes the cards are doors too, so I'm wondering if kind of went with no doors, no objectives, no crates on a lot of the campaign expansions. I hadn't noticed that. Man, James, you're shooter, keep track of a bunch of things you see.
Oh my gosh. James is amazing.
Oh yeah, James is the best guy here. For that stuff.
Mine like a steel trap.
Sadly, that just means I spend too much time thinking about Zombicide.
And I was extra freaking out about those tiles you mentioned for the TMNT time crash, Schmedley, because if it wasn't for this godforsaken podcast, I would be making so many more custom missions that would cross over in crazy, wacky ways across the games. So I hope everyone here appreciates it. You're ruining my fun. No, just kidding. This is fun.
There's more ideas for Simon for 2nd edition season 2. Give us crossover Invader tiles. Give us crossover Undead or Alive tiles.
Everybody's always wanted crossover stuff.
I mean, I think Time Crash is the perfect way to do that. Like, here's a campaign. It has rules as written to just use these tiles, but also use some tiles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More tiles.
That way it's not just for people who own everything.
Hey survivors, Ryan here. This is part 1 of this episode and review. Stay tuned for next episode for the next part as we continue our deep dive and discussion. Thanks again for listening to the Zombicide Fans podcast. Zombicide Fans is an unofficial podcast and is not affiliated with or endorsed by CMON or Guillotine Games. Thank you from your hosts, Ryan Messick, Schmedley Mayers, and James Fisher. And thanks to our special guest, Jason Pinsa, plus our sponsor, BoardGameGoodies.shop, where listeners can save 10% with coupon code PODCAST. You can check out the show on all major podcast listening platforms and on YouTube. You can reach us at zombicidefans@gmail.com. The podcast is hosted at zombicidefans.com. Join our communities at the Zombicide Discord and the All Zombicide Games Facebook group. All links will be in the show notes. Until next time, survive.